for the next lesson that you guys are going to be doing, you're going to be doing a watercolor painting. And this is different than the watercolor painting that you guys did when you were in Art 2. This is a little more in-depth and a little more detailed. In fine art painting, the term watercolor denotes a painting medium in which color pigments are bound in water-soluble agents. Originally, these binders were animal glues or certain sugars, but nowadays the standard substance is gum arabic. A variety of additives can be used, honey, glycerin, to increase plasticity and create other effects. Watercolors are generally applied by sable or squirrel hair brushes onto white tinted paper or card, although supports can encompass canvas, leather, and papyrus. Okay, watercolors are a highly versatile medium. They can be applied to everything from paper to canvas, stone, wood, and fabrics. Many fine versions of watercolor paintings rendered on paper, manuscripts, maps, and miniatures can be found in our museums today. While watercolor painting dominated Asian art for thousands of years, in Western art, it was largely confined to preparatory sketches until the late 18th century. In what is now referred to as the Golden Age of watercolor painting, artists from the School of English Landscape Painting raised the status of watercolor painting to a serious and independent art form. Okay. Here are a few examples. One artist that you could probably look up if you would like to see more works done, John Singer Sargent. This is an example of his work. I like to include, when I show you guys what to do for this project, I like to include a variety of styles. Sometimes the appeal of watercolor is that the paint itself looks almost like water. It's very fluid looking, and sometimes washed out and not as clear. But if you research watercolors a little bit, you can find paintings that are done in highly, highly detailed ways. So here are a couple more examples of different subject matter. And just kind of different ways of tackling. I like portraits done in watercolor because I feel like there's so much light that can be had or can be achieved using watercolors that you can't necessarily get as well with other mediums. It just has this airy quality to it, which I really like. All right, so the vocabulary associated with this, there's a ton. A lot of this is review from when you did it in Art 2, so just stay with me on this. Wet on wet is a technique used in watercolor and ink drawing where the paper is wet first and then the paint is applied with a saturated brush. Dry on dry is a technique where you, the paint is applied using a brush with very little water onto a piece of dry paper. Wet on dry, the paper is wet first, and the paint is applied with a brush using little water. Dry on wet is a technique using where paint is applied to dry paper using a saturated brush. Gradated is a subtle, gradual change from light to dark in an area of painting or drawing. Wash is to sweep or move or be carried by water, filling the area with little or no defined strokes. A variegated wash changes from one color to another. Dry brush is a brush that is so dry that it leaves marks on the paper. Blotting is lifting the color with an absorbent tissue or paper towel. Scraping, making an impression into thicker paper like watercolor paper to achieve thin lines over color. Bleeding color into a wet area where it looks almost feathered in. Splatter, positive splatter is to splatter onto white paper, and negative splatter is to splatter clean water onto a painted area. Salt absorbs water to give an effect. If it's too wet, the water melts the salt, but if it's too dry, it won't work. So you've got to have this like shiny wet area when you apply salt, not puddle wet. Rubbing alcohol has a similar effect to salt, and you can experiment with that a little bit. Alcohol evaporates the water and gives you like this, I like to use it for like bubbles and things like that. Incised line is to scrape a line onto the paper, paint over it, and the paint collects in that area. It kind of puddles down inside. Okay. Different brush types. I just wanted to throw this in there because I thought it was really cool. Mop brush is a nice brush to apply lots of heavy areas of water. They're usually round and very thick. Kind of reminds me of a cattail. Round brushes are brushes that you use for nice sharp points. Flat brushes would be for nice sharp edges and corners. A liner, obviously, for outlining. A wash brush, which you guys are familiar with. We use those all the time. A rigger, we don't really have any of those. And a refillable brush. Refillable brushes are, it's got a brush tip on the end, and it's got a little reservoir that you add water to it. So you can blend with clean water as you go along rather than dipping and blending and dipping and blending. Different types of paper. I like this visual because it shows you a rough texture, a cold press texture, and a hot press texture. Okay, supplies for this project. You're going to need watercolor paints, which you were supposed to have gotten on your own, water cup, masking tape. It says glue or glue stick, but I'm going to get rid of that because I decided not to do that. Okay. Let's see. Masking tape, watercolor paper, 11 by 14. I actually think it's a 9 by 12 now that I have had a chance to go through. I think you have 4 pieces that are 9 by 12. And of those 4 pieces, one of them is for your painting and the others are for practice. You're going to need watercolor brushes. You're going to need paper towels, and you do not need these scissors. Okay. And you'll definitely need a pencil for this one. Steps for this project. Number 1, choose a subject to paint in watercolor. This should be something highly detailed with a background that fills the paper. Draw the bones out lightly on a piece of watercolor paper. So pick one of those pieces of paper, draw your bones. Number 2, practice some watercolor techniques on the remaining pieces of watercolor paper. Remember to tape down your paper to a hard surface on all 4 sides before you paint. The videos below will help jog your memory on using watercolor. So you might want to try the washes and gradients and then the mini painting techniques along with the video just to kind of, as a practice to get you going, okay? Number 3, tape your painting down to a hard surface on all 4 sides. Using the wash techniques, build the background first. Leave anything white that needs to stay white. Number 4, add details on top. Be sure not to scrub the paint too much. If you add water to any area, it will wash out the color under it. So it acts as an eraser. Reminders, water is your eraser. Paper towels can help soak up excess water and color. Do not use an eraser on the painting. It'll take the paint right off. Do not leave the painting in the sunlight. Sunlight fades watercolor. When the painting is dry, complete your critique sheet. What am I grading you on? 20 points for practice sheets, 10 points for your subject matter, 20 points for the watercolor technique, 20 points for your overall project, 10 points for creativity, 10 points for craftsmanship, and 10 points for critique. When you're all done, put your name on the front of your practice sheets and on your final painting, photograph them all, upload those with your critique sheet to Google Classroom under the proper assignment.